On March 21st, Donald Trump issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran. If Iran did not lift its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the United States would strike, targeting Iran's power infrastructure. But when the deadline came, nothing happened. Instead, it was postponed. Then, it was postponed again and again. Each time, the explanation was the same: productive negotiation. So what's really going on here? On the surface, this looks like a classic geopolitical stand. The United States is applying pressure. Iran resisting. Tensions rising in one of the most sensitive regions in the world. The Strait of Hormuz alone carries a significant portion of the global oil supply. Any disruption there immediately affects global markets. So naturally, the narrative becomes this is about security, stability, and preventing escalation. But if that's the case, why keep delaying? Why issue strong ultimatums, only to step back each and every time? If you look a little deeper, this may not be all about the war. The United States is not facing an oil shortage. The real issue is oil prices. When oil prices rise, everything becomes more expensive. Transportation, production, daily living costs. And that creates pressure, not just economically, but politically, especially during a sensitive period. So instead of rushing into conflict, there's a need to control the situation, to manage tension without triggering real disruption. In that sense, these repeated ultimatums may not be about action, but about signaling. Because sometimes what looks like a confrontation is actually negotiation. What looks like instability is actually controlled tension. And what looks like war may actually be a part of a much larger game. A game of leverage, of positioning, of influence. In this kind of system, the goal is not always to fight, but to gain an advantage. And if you look at what's actually happening on the ground, the strait is not fully closed. Oil is still flowing. Markets are reacting but not collapsing, which means this situation is being carefully managed, not resolved, not escalated, but sustained. Because in reality, a controlled level of tension can be more useful than an actual war. Now, follow the money. When uncertainty rises in the Middle East, oil markets react immediately. Traders anticipate disruption. Companies begin to secure supply early, and that creates a wave of panic buying. Prices go up, not only because of real shortages, but because of fear of future shortages. And in that process, major oil-producing regions, especially the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, benefit from higher oil prices. Higher oil prices mean higher revenues, even without increasing production. At the same time, conflict, or the threat of it, drives demand in another sector. Military spending increases. Orders are placed. Stock prices of major defense companies move. Companies like Lockheed Martin see increased attention from markets because in times like this, uncertainty itself becomes an economic driver. So if we step back and look at the full picture, Iran demonstrates resilience and strengthens internal unity. Gulf states benefit from elevated oil prices. The United States defense sector sees increased demand and rising valuations. But then we have to ask, who is actually paying the price? Higher energy costs affect everyday people. Inflation spreads across economies. And beyond economics, there are real human costs. Lives disrupted, lives lost, and families affected in ways that never make headlines. So, in the end, this is not just about geopolitics. It's about understanding how power works. Not just what is happening on the surface, but what is driving it underneath. Because when you begin to look beyond the headlines, you start to see the structure behind the story. And that clarity matters, so that you and I can navigate this uncertain world with a little more awareness and a little more perspective.